really overwhelmed and was having like panic attacks every time I was entering a space that was similar to where I'd been. And, that's a sign of like PTSD, but I didn't know that at the
Yes, today we have Christina with us. Welcome back, Christina.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Where did we stay? I know we were talking about cults, and then we were going towards the after cult life,
Mm,
and what you discovered in that. And the last part you were telling us about the relationship you were in, and then you got out. Um, and we were talking a bit about the feeling, like the feeling in your body, and yeah, how you felt something was off, and how that
mm,
subsequently uh, led you to take the steps to get out of the relationship. Um,
mm.
yeah, so that's where we left off, and then I had to go. um, and once we made the new appointment, you were talking about you want to talk about self love and self relationship, or being in the right relationship versus codependence. So I think in comparison to where we left off, that's actually a perfect direction.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'll leave that to you. Which side do you wanna uh, pick up on that side? What do you want to
Yeah.
self love and self relationships?
Yeah. I mean, I think they both kind of lead into one another. The interesting thing is like, and I don't remember how much I shared in the last episode, but my body was getting louder and it's one of those things that was about self relationship because as I was paying attention to what was happening in my body, I was paying attention to me, right? And I was starting to notice that I was uncomfortable in a way that I hadn't even been capable of before. And I got really overwhelmed and was having like panic attacks every time I was entering a space that was similar to where I'd been. And, that's a sign of like PTSD. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, every time I go here, I'm sick. And I want to like, I think it's interesting because like within our culture, we're taught to override those things. And we're like, it's just feelings. Like if you know you need to be here, you know you need to be here. And there's just this override. But I actually chose to listen to that, whether it was quote unquote right or not, because I was honoring what most of me was saying and I was actually listening to myself. So whether I would like eventually go back or eventually find a safer whatever spirituality or go back to church even, I had to listen to all of what was saying and I needed space to hear that. So that was a huge step for me in self-love and in self-relationship.
Right. So in this, and I'm trying to imagine the space for some reason that you were going into, but I resonate with what you were saying, that sometimes our feeling is so loud, um, whether it is you need space or you don't feel comfortable in a certain space. Um, but we're taught to push through things
Mm.
culturally, and I think it's almost gone global at this point. That it's become human culture, right? We have to push through. We have to persevere, and it's very interesting because I was talking to someone yesterday, and I'm organizing something. That's the side note.
Mm.
That's the situation we're in. I'm organizing something, and this person is helping me. And my approach is we have to invite some people to come on the panel.
Mm.
My approach is very much feeling.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, when do I ask this person how to, if they want to be on a panel or not? And he's like, no, you need to ask right away. And I'm like, they're in a conversation. So for some reason, as you were saying that there's about feeling, I went back to this moment yesterday. Uh,
Mm.
that I was very much saying, no, I have to feel what is right, when is the right moment. And that was a side note of your thing, sorry. But it's just because it has to do with feeling. That's where I went um,
Mm,
into that. And how how does it feel? Because for me, it's like I said, I have to meditate on it. Uh,
mm,
I'm curious how that feels for you, like in your body when your body's.
mm. Yeah. I mean, I love that you brought this up and I love that you have a recent example of it as well. It's interesting. Like I I think there's an importance to the mind, like obviously, but I think what's happened is we just like completely have overridden everything else for the mind. So like bringing the mind into its rightful place in like all of this is something that's not new, it's ancient, but like it feels new to most of us because it's like we're very out of practice with this. For me, like when I know something, I know it instantly. So I have to be like present in my body when someone asks me something and I immediately know the answer. I used to have like a notepad and I still do this. Like if I'm meeting with a new client or a new potential collaborator, they say hi and I write yes or no on a piece of paper. And and it seems like, wow, you're so judgmental. And I used to judge myself for being judgmental, but it's not that. It's nothing to do with like their like how they spoke or anything. It's just like this instinct that I'm just like, yes or no. And I've ignored it before and it's been not great. So,
Yeah. I recognize that it's you're like I'm just I'm being difficult.
yeah.
I should give them a chance. I should.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
You're completely right. And it's funny that you actually wrote yes or no down.
I had to like do something to hold myself accountable to the instant knowing because I know not everyone is like that. But for me, it's like this the first knowing is the most honest one. And then my mind jumps in and is like, that you should give them a chance and you should whatever. And this is you being judgmental when really like it's just beyond that. And they could be a great person. And on paper, they're a great person. And maybe in real life, they're a great person. But for some reason, this isn't for me. And that's important for me to like know and honor. Otherwise, it just gets, I just feel it like the entire time.
Yeah, it sticks. They say someone once told me, but this has to is relating to music. They said, within the first 3 seconds, whether you like a song or not.
Oh, I love this game. We do like a 15-minute rule with movies, and everyone asks me, like, we'll watch with our group of friends, and they're like, we'll give Christina the 15 minutes, and she'll let us know if it's going to be good or bad. Sometimes I know before then, but it's always like they look at me like, what do you think?
So you watch 15 minutes of the movie and then you decide if it's gonna be.
Yeah, sometimes I watch the trailer and that's enough, but we always give it 15 minutes into the movie, and I'm just like, no, y'all, this is not getting any better.
That makes sense. Part of me, so I had a period of time that I purposely watched bad movies. Like, even though it's bad, but I would just watch it and be like, to appreciate the effort that people put into making it, regardless.
I can relate to that.
But I'm like, this is horrible. That is some bad effects, but I'm watching it anyway.
There's a beauty to watching things that people create because it is art, whether it's like good art or not.
That's true. That's true. Right? Like, art. Yeah. So this is so good. I'm sorry, I keep digressing.
I love it.
um, yeah, it to just sum up that part that we were talking about is that we know we have this innate feeling, but through I think conditioning that makes you kind of doubt your own intuition. Uh,
Mm,
we start we start conditioning the intuition before we kind of like let it play out. just in
Mm,
case that feeling was wrong, I think. Uh,
mm,
Sounds like a fear of kind of like, I might miss out if my feeling was wrong. So maybe let me try it anyway.
ooh, I have a theory on this, and like, I don't know anything, but this theory is like I think that we don't trust our intuition because we can't explain it to other people. So if we trust it and it goes wrong, quote unquote, or not well, then we only have ourselves to blame and it doesn't make sense to other people. So there's no logical way. Like our cultures are so centric on logic and understanding one another that like on a logical level that we're just like, if we feel like we can explain it away, like, well, it was a good choice because of this and this and this and this. Here's the reasons, this and this and this. We feel like we are maintaining some level of safety with the group. But if we choose to trust our intuition and then, something, perceived bad happens, then it's just on us. And we're like, well, I trusted my intuition. And so it feels really vulnerable because it feels entirely like we actually chose to trust ourselves and like believe in ourselves when other people didn't. And that's a really vulnerable position to be in because we feel like we're completely exposed and like it's just me. And then there's like all those doubts and all those insecurities because we're focused on logic that come in.
Yeah, and then you have to, um, in a way, from you going from your theory, in a way, my mind was thinking about, then maybe you start doubting yourself because the choice you made was wrong, and then you maybe start giving more importance to the logic of
Mm.
other people, and you don't trust your own logic anymore. Um, and I don't know, what are some of the ways that one could deal with something like that?
Yeah. Like I feel like, and I wish there was just like a really easy way to do that, but like I really feel like it's like growing up, like, and learning to do anything. Like it is, if we're going to learn to trust ourselves, there has to be a space where we can choose and have things not go well and still stay on our side. And that's the vulnerability. That's the like really like the sticky part of that because like I really think we build self trust by choosing to trust ourselves on, like, at a level that you feel like you have capacity for, like a smaller level. And as you build capacity, you can do bigger, whatever that means, like for you, levels of trusting yourself. But it's so critical and so important that in doing that, you one, don't believe that it's going to like go perfectly. And two, you're committed to believing yourself through the entire process. Even when things go poorly, you're going to be on your own side. You're going to say, like, it's okay. Like, this happened. I believe my own experience of this. I'm learning from this. That's the self trust that, like, I've yet to meet them, but I believe there's people out there who had like a secure childhood and like grew up with this, they had parents who were just like, it's okay. Like you trusted yourself and then you do it again. You'll try again and you'll figure it out. Like it's the belief that like we are good enough and we will grow and we will learn and we don't need to outsource that. It's like having like a teacher or like a guide who's always like, when you get it wrong, they're not like, well, you should have listened to me. They're like, dig deeper and listen to yourself and let's do this again, you know?
The there's some very interesting points that you touched on, which is the need for perfection, which I think is also something that has become kind of like a cultural thing. I mean,
All these things come back to white supremacy, I'm just going to say.
well, let's dig into that in a second. Otherwise, we're gonna digress again.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I don't mind digression, but I'm like, to whoever's listening to this, they're like, why these women cannot finish this? sentence. But um, but just I love it. It's okay. But I wanted to like summarize this part. Um, so actually imagining the iceberg where
Mhm.
we don't see. I think it's almost become kind of like a meme when you only see like this part of success and things. We only highlight. I mean, that's what I want to say. We only highlight the things that go right,
Mhm.
and we don't see all of the fails, the attempts underneath that iceberg. And then when you want to try something, the same thing or similar thing, you think, oh, this person, uh, just to take a very simple example, this person is great at painting. They must like magically have gotten this skill. I should try it. And then you try your first painting and you fail horribly. Let's say, or you just, it's not up to your expectations. You give up
Mhm.
because you didn't see that this person has been practicing since maybe they're eight, 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that's the obsession with the success, with only highlighted that part of the success, with um, perfection and not being allowed to
Mhm.
to be wrong, to fail. And the other part that you were mentioning, that it starts from childhood, uh,
Mhm.
that with things like grades, that you have to get an A, um, for the Americans and for the Europeans, or for the Dutch, yes, the European, they all have different systems. But for the Dutch, we have like from 1 to 10 scales, whatever the scale is in your
Mhm.
country, that goes from worst to best, that you
Mhm.
are continuously pushed towards that the best. You have to be the best at everything and anything you do, and you don't get to fail. You don't get to have a trial and tribulations getting there.
Yeah.
um, I think that has a hard effect, and I think that's what it becomes our inner voice later when we grow up.
Mhm.
And then we still have, I think, that inner child that wants to try and that wants to explore, that feels things like in the first instance. Um, but that inner child has again been conditioned to to not trust that inner voice, so that this other, it's almost like you're split into two now. Like there's you that you were born with, and there's the you that has been conditioned.
Mhm.
Kind of continuously polices the other one because that's what you know. And as an adult, you kind of become the imposer of those things that we've known, and we kind of push down the inner child. That's why I personally find it very important to kind of like recognize your inner child. A lot of the work that I've done for myself in my healing has been really reconnecting. I never let the inner child go. So it was always an important part for me in making my art. Um,
Mhm.
but I did at a certain point notice that I have been conditioning myself to like remove things that I was told was not good about myself, and
Mhm.
essentially that healing has been, no, it's really okay the way I was thinking before and the way I was feeling before.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's it was trying. It's a long summary of what we were just talking about.
No, I love it so much, and I love what you're how you're describing this because like the work that I do with my clients is like about congruence because you were talking about these two parts of yourself that are at war with one another, and in self relationship, working to be in relationship with both of those with compassion is so critical because your conditioning is there for a reason. Like, not that it's good, but it is a way you've survived in a system that is harmful to you. So having a relationship with it without letting it control you, having a relationship with your inner child without just doing exactly what your 5-year-old inner self wants you to do, like relating to these parts of you, relating to your body in a way that is in right relationship, that allows this congruence and allows you to not feel at war with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because I call that also my inner peace.
Mm,
I feel like I lost at some point, and I recognize that it's like balancing out. And indeed, the 5-year-old doesn't know everything. There are some reasons why adults try to teach us some things, and
mm,
I think it's important to know when to take a teaching and when the teaching is not right for you or just
mm,
not right in general. um,
mm.
which now makes me very curious as to the relation with white supremacy that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, I see this as like, because all the systems that we're talking about, like capitalism, and we touched on but didn't name colonialism, this is and patriarchy are hierarchical structures. So they are structures of domination, and they've come into being to prop up white supremacy. So there's which colonized and dominated all the cultures in our world, including my heritage as well, German heritage. So there's this domino effect of, I think, shame and from what our past has happened in our past, and a line of harm. It's like a trauma line. So instead of knowing how to heal, we continue to dominate other things, dominate other people, dominate other cultures, and so it continues. And I think in on the like body level, and Sonia Renee Taylor discusses this way better than I do, obviously, but it's on an individual level, we do that by dominating our own bodies in order to survive in a culture that tells us that our bodies are not safe, useful, good enough, okay. So so individually, I think the work of coming into relationship with yourself is a fight against white supremacy, because you are learning to relate instead of to dominate
Mhm.
at the most like individual level. And it needs to be individual and collective. Obviously, this is not something we do in a silo, because otherwise we're just, propping up white supremacy in a different way. But I think it's really powerful because it is ultimately, it's taking that hierarchical structure and leveling it out and saying we are actually in relationship. One is not better than the other. And that although is not new, is not how we were raised. So it is like a coming back home. And it is also like we feel awkward in it because we're not practiced at it.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I completely see that and understand that in that sense, and I'm reminded of a lot of decolonial work that is actually going on, um, and indeed relating to ourselves, our bodies, the effect that the systems have on us. And I think also the generational, so you're saying the trauma is generational being passed down. And I think maybe the same as you have something called post-traumatic slave syndrome. Uh,
Mm,
I would think there would be a similar equivalent for people in let's say the white lineage, um, where some doesn't even understand that the effects of the systems that were put in place by their ancestors, how that's currently affecting us.
Mm,
Especially being someone that works in the development sector, I see people still with a lot of white savior syndrome.
mhm,
If not that, then they don't. They've never realized or contemplated that the way of living currently in the West, why the West has so many riches and so many advances,
mm,
whether technologically or economically, and whatever.
mhm,
That a lot of it are because of these systems that are in
mhm,
place and basically um, unfairly affecting the global South. Uh,
mm.
and that I'm very much agreeing with you that it is individual level because the information is there for them to find out that this is in fact so.
Yes.
um, but also collectively that people that have already this awareness say about okay, we have this awareness, we've done some work individually in healing our own um, whatever effect it has had on us, and we now have this understanding of the interconnectedness of all of it, and
Mm,
we see that there are people still lacking this understanding, and we will then go and try to bring awareness to them. Though I think, I think or I feel that how do we reach everyone? Is my question. Is this possible? It's not possible. That's what I wanted to say, but I didn't want to say it so negatively. Is it possible that we reach everyone and
mm,
have like I don't know collective a big collective healing? Uh,
mm. Yeah. I I have some thoughts about this. Mainly because like I mean, I was raised to be a white savior. Like I had dreams about like dying for, people of color to know the gospel of, white Jesus. Like that's how I was raised. So I have come from that background and am guilty of perpetuating a lot of this in my lifetime. And one thing that I've noticed, and I really think is critical in the healing of this, because it has been in mine and so many people that I've talked with, is actually like knowing how to be with shame and stepping out of a shame cycle. Because I think like the awareness, like you said, has come more prevalent. But what happened was a lot of us, especially white women, we took that. I'm just going to use a collective we took that and stayed in a shame cycle. So instead did this like, oh no, I feel shame because I've perpetuated this. And then I operate and like do things out of guilt, which is actually just like tokenism or white saviorism, or like it's actually not in relationship because I did like collectively, we don't know how to be with the feelings of like, this has happened. And I really think that like on a global level, there's most of us don't know how to be with having caused harm at all. Like we're not taught how to be with like I made a mistake and then not make it about us being okay and good, because there's shame there. Because in a healthy state, it's like you caused harm and then you're like, oh, I caused harm. Like I'm so sorry. But then I do some work and I'm like, okay, like I want to learn from this. And I don't make it about, but I'm a good person and I do good things. And like, I'm
yeah,
not really like that. And I'm not really like them. Like it just becomes like a whole defense because we don't know how to be with that like piece of I'm not perfect. And
yeah,
that's okay, because not being perfect is not okay. So in when my perfection comes into any sort of like question, my intention is to just defend it instead of actually being like, no, that's okay. Like I'm human. And that's another piece of white saviorism or white supremacy that I think is holding that in place, because but I think this is why it's so important to be in relationship with yourself, because as you grow capacity, as you heal, and you're able to be with, I have caused harm, you're able to be with that without making it about you and without making you need to be perfect and to defend yourself. It just is. You're doing that in relationship with yourself, and you're saying, like, I yelled at my kid. That's so sad. Like, I'm so sorry. And I don't need to make my kid make me feel better about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's like with your inner child, with the other pieces of you. If you can be in relationship with those, then you have greater capacity to be in relationship with, my ancestors have done some really shitty things. I'm not like, but I'm a good person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my theory.
Yeah. No, and I think that's important because that as you said, the shame that my ancestors did horrific things, and to like as a person of obviously I have color, uh, uh, like that they almost want to apologize, or they either want to apologize for it, or they want to say, but it wasn't me. And I'm like, I know it wasn't you. No, not you personally. I know that. But yeah, I think it's indeed important to be able to say, whoa, that's horrific, or even, whoa, I can't comprehend what was even in their minds to be able to do such a thing. Of course, I get that, and but the defending it, yeah, it's a one thing that came to mind as you were naming the different ways that I say white people defend this is my favorite one. But I have a black friend.
Yeah, or a partner even.
Oh yeah. I, I've had this thing with the Dutch, because yeah, my relationship of colonialism is with the Dutch, as we are still a Dutch colony, the island that I'm from. Even though some people want to argue that it's territory, but potato potato for me.
Yeah.
um, I've had teachers of mine, and very nice teachers that I love dearly, but there's this thing where they went, oh, but you're Dutch. And I was like, indeed, I'm not Dutch. um, my passport is Dutch. I cannot deny that. I have a Dutch nationality, but I personally am not Dutch. Like, I can't separate the two. And they were insistent, no, you're Dutch. And
They needed to claim you.
yeah, and that, I think that's also harmful, okay, because that's like wanting to accept that. I appreciate the side of the intention that she was trying to accept me and my people as Dutch, seeing as we are in the Dutch kingdom and everything. But at the same time, by telling me straight up, no, you're Dutch and nothing else, I feel part of my identity being erased.
Yeah.
Because as I said, my nationality is Dutch, but I'm mixed with indigenous South Americans, with Africans, but maybe I have some Dutch ancestors. I don't know, because the keeping of papers weren't always so greatly done back then, and I just don't identify, at least as, let's say, 100% Dutch, because I feel that I'm erasing all of my other. I'm a Caribbean woman first, because that's where I come from. The Caribbean island that I had happened to be born on has some kind of relationship with the Dutch that makes us have Dutch passport at birth. Uh,
Mm.
I learned Dutch from small, so my I think preschool and all of that was in Dutch. Um, but then that's the other thing that I was taught Dutch by someone that speaks Dutch as a second language as well.
Mm.
Um, and when I came here, I was like, I thought I spoke Dutch brilliant. Not, not really.
Yeah, I'm sure. Depending on where you're learning a language from, there's going to be a lot of nuance. I feel like you touched on something really critical. Like as a broad statement, I would say that like anytime you tell someone how they identify against what they've said is like that's problematic. Like coming from like as a queer person, like you just don't fucking do that. Like you don't know like how who they are and where they come from. Like you don't you can't tell someone else how they like who they are inside and like you know what I mean? Like that's so problematic on like multiple levels because only you know you, especially as someone who has a culture and heritage that's been colonized.
Mhm.
Like for them to be like, no, you're this is like is a form of erasure and is a form of like just taking and trying to take away, whether, you know, not intentionally, but take away your heritage, like erase what you know of your culture
Yeah, yeah,
and force you to like assimilate in like a modern way. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and I think there's also an element of I think shame in that in wanting to at least remove the shame of what are we doing to these islands and we don't even recognize them as our own, or maybe in her community she knows people that don't see us as such, and I
Mm.
feel like that must be a reaction of but yeah, I feel shame that we don't accept these people as Dutch when they are in the kingdom, and maybe we should. And I think she convinced herself, no, we should. We're contemplating how we would actually feel
Mm.
about that. Um, and yeah, as you're saying, it's part of erasure, and I think that is I don't know if the erasure, there's something with the erasure that I wanted to go into, especially a hot topic now with like development work, is that decolonization is the going to other countries thinking that you're some kind of savior uh,
Mm.
and bringing your Western development. You are not developed, sir, madam, or whatever you might identify
Yeah.
as, to not also erase queer people in the country.
Yeah.
um, and going there, and this teacher that I was talking about is a teacher from my like development studies, and yeah, just going there and I think again the shame, if I look at it broadly, again this sense of shame comes up because here we are in a quote unquote developed country, studying about these people and their poverty that they're in, and you're you're feeling shame that you get to have, I don't know, $3 coffees, and the coffee coming from uh, some impoverished nation, and there's from this sense of shame you then go there and you try to help people, and I had to catch myself because now as I'm going back home, I caught myself with this mindset that yeah, I have a diploma in this. So I too somewhere in my head have to kind of remove some of the less useful things, because I caught myself saying I'm gonna go back home to help them. And then I was like, wait,
Mhm.
what? No, what? Where is this coming from? It's like I I can go back and contribute to
Mhm.
uh, an already developing island,
Mm.
um, which I think it's a much better energy to come in with. then
Mm.
oh, I've been gone for 13 years. I've studied. I know things, so I now come to help you.
Yeah. You said something earlier that I think is really critical in all of this. You said like that your teacher who was like telling you that you were Dutch, like wasn't thinking about how you and your people would feel about it.
Mhm.
And I was like, that is kind of how that operates because it is out of shame. It's like this, you don't even consider what someone else might want in this. And in that itself is a dehumanization because you're looking at someone and saying, essentially, I know better for you than you do. I'm helping you. And instead of having a conversation about it, which takes relationship and takes like in social work here, you know, if people actually followed it, which most of them don't, there's this concept of nothing about me without me. And I really wish that that was more implemented because that's like that's how relationships should work. Like we're not deciding things for and about each other without each other. And when that happens, you cause more harm than good, or you're like not taking into consideration a culture that already has incredible strengths. And instead of supporting people to develop the strengths that are already there, you're just like, but here, have free bread or whatever. And it's
Like,
like you
bread.
didn't ask. It's supposed it's this idea that like because of perfectionism, I think like you want to already know
Mm.
what someone needs without having to the vulnerability of saying like, I don't actually know.
I think a beautiful thing that came to mind is the question, how can I be of service to you? So if you're
Mm,
coming in, okay, I know some things that could potentially um, alleviate whatever issue this person is having, but first, let me ask them if they want um,
mm,
this.
yeah.
What part of it do they want, if any? Because they can
Mm,
also choose to say no.
mm,
But there's another thing is I think sometimes it feels like these people can't even say no because how dare they? They are
yeah.
you're poor and I'm bringing you things. And I actually had for my other podcast because I have two podcasts now.
Nice.
So that this is more talking about like on an individual level of things, personal experiences, and the other one is for my project, which is having to do more with like development
Mm,
sector. And I was talking to someone that does a project called Equal Trade Alliance,
mm,
and he was talking about the paradox of poverty, wherein Africa has all of these riches, and Africa is basically feeding most of the world at this point. Yet
mhm,
Africans are poor and impoverished, and he left Africa not as a refugee, but as wanting to understand um, what is happening with this relationship between Europe and Africa.
mm,
And in his search, and I think he also studied like psychology and these things. And in his search, he found that there's an unequal relationship. Um, and yeah, so this is more on a country nation level, unequal. I think how we can see this is manifesting this issue that we're
mm,
having on the micro level that we were talking about. I'll see it manifests
mm,
on a more wider scale that Europe is basically taking a lot of materials, be it food or metals, whatever, and they are not paying Africa
mm,
properly for these materials. Yet
mm,
they're having a substantial amount of profit on it.
mhm,
And with a very small percentage of this profit, they're going back to Africa and going like, here, have some aid. And then the aid is like the African can't even decide how they want to spend the aid because it comes with stipulations
mhm,
how they have to spend it, and then they go
yeah.
into the government in Africa, and he said that the how Africa was basically cut up like a cake has to do with this because it's not according to how the Africans see Africa. Uh,
Mm,
cut up as a cake, and basically they said that the government owns all the materials, the ground, and these things, and that's why you have this situation that um, Africa is constantly the paradox that it's constantly behind. There's constantly poverty in Africa because there's constant meddling with African policy, and
Mm.
there's constant unequal trade happening where, as I said, that they're getting a profit. So what if he's trying to do is this equal trade alliance is saying no, um, you're taking our materials and you're making stuff from it and making a profit. We should see some of that profit back.
Mm.
And I think that in that situation, he said that once we have more equal relationship with each other, and we're actually being compensated properly for our value, the value of our materials, that then we can have a much better relationship. It's not like um, we were suddenly stop trading with each other, or there's like no more conversation between Europe and Africa. It just becomes a more leveled field of conversation where
Mm.
the Africans can say, well, you know what? You have so much knowledge about this. We will pay you for your knowledge.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. As you're describing this, I'm seeing like how clearly this is an abusive relationship.
mm,
Like that Europe and the US are like have taken advantage of and abused resources from other people. Like that constant destabilization is the way that you control someone, right? Like you constantly make it so they don't have the time to think. They don't have the time. So you're taking all of that so that there's this like in that chaos, then you're like, but you don't deserve this. And like, you don't know what to do with this. So we'll take it. And like, and then handing back pennies and being like, we're so generous.
yeah,
You don't deserve this.
gonna spat on the back.
Yes.
Gonna
Yes.
be good.
Yes.
It's insane. Yes, but that is a perfect correlation back to like how that happens. Also, indeed, in my own abusive relationship, I felt destabilized, and afterwards, when
Mm.
you're like really out of it and you have the time to think, and you're like, oh, I was kept in a constant state of fear. I was kept in a situation where I was not financially stable enough to leave, where ironically and paradoxically also I was paying for everything.
Yes.
So yeah, it is very, yeah, I recognize that
Mhm.
indeed, and I use the word that it's sadistic in a way
Mm.
to constantly want to cause this chaos just to cause distraction, um, or just so that the Africans can really stand in their power, essentially. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, and
That threatens white supremacy
yes, because that's the
because you can't be supreme if there's equality.
yeah, exactly, and yeah, and they're like, there's indeed no other explanation for me than that, because that other,
Mhm.
the alternative where there's actually more abundance, where actually I think Europe can actually profit more if Africa can say, well, you don't have to give us aid, we're paying you now for you're getting more money. What are we talking about?
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing is like the abuser is operating out of this like absolute terror and fear that there's not enough.
Yeah.
When ultimately they would have their needs met better if the other person were not abused because there's so much resource in that person. That's why the abuser is there
Yeah.
because they need the resource. They're there because they're like, there's never enough. And oh my God, I found this person or this country or this place or this thing that has so much goodness. I'm going to take as much as I can because I'm afraid that I don't have any on my own. And then they don't realize that, like you said, if this was equal, there's so much to go around. There's so much resource that you've just been hoarding that is making you think you don't have enough when you really have more than enough.
And I think that also perfectly sums up the capitalistic system where
Yes. Yeah.
you're you're
Yeah.
creating this sense of lack, this sense of
Mhm.
there's not enough. So you must buy it now because next week we don't have this sale anymore. you know?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. Urgency. That, I mean, and that is another form of destabilization, right? We're operating off of people's nervous systems that are overwhelmed and fried.
Yeah.
And so sales is then like tailored to taking advantage of people who are in destabilized states.
Wow. We've come like a full circle. So we sidetracked, but we got there.
A couple of rabbit trails.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, and I think once we start dismantling this system, not even dismantling, I think some would say we have to dismantling and like rebuild. Um, but I think it has to be a transition because if you like dismantle it, it's like complete chaos, which is more.
Yeah, we don't want. We've seen that happen
Yeah,
with countries, and it's. I mean, they have beautiful governments now, but the price to get there was
yeah,
costly.
exactly. So, and I think we can do that better, and we can like, or there's a better way to do it. Like, but like we can do it better. Better way of doing it than complete chaos. We can start looking at the systems that are not working, whether it being like interrelationship, like on a more personal level, like the day to day relationships that you have with other people, or at a bigger level where maybe companies start saying, well, the way we're operating now is very destructive and not sustainable, and we don't see ourselves surviving in the future like this.
Mhm.
So let's start changing that way now, sooner than later. uh,
Mhm.
yes. What are maybe your final thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the state of the United States right now is pretty scary um, in terms of that. Like, I do and always have thought like that. I mean, my emotional side is like tear it all down, but my like logical side is like, and like we need a stable transition. We need a leader who cares about people. We need like somebody who's non-binary, like whether gender or like neutral. We just need someone who actually can uphold the good of everyone. And the way things have been going makes me really nervous that that's not happening. But also the things that I hear from people individually and in communities is really heartwarming. So there's a very big disconnect, and I think that's true in most places. There's like a pretty big disconnect from the people to the people who have power. And I think like I don't know. I think of the movie is it Bug's Life?
Oh,
This was like one of my childhood movies. Like
yeah.
we forget how many of us there are and we forget our power. Like that in general, I feel like that is something that happens because we have been beat down by the system. So we tend to forget the resources and the riches we have within ourselves and within our communities. And not to say that's our fault at all. I think there is right now a collective awakening to our individual and communal power and in caring for one another that is like I don't know what's going to happen, but like I really hope that those of us who have an open heart and who continue to try and continue to learn will be the ones who are leading whatever happens next.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so too. And there was like two things that popped up as you were saying. Let me see if I can remember them. Um, One was that I think that this disconnect that you're saying is that, um, let's say, people that are pretty self-serving, as most of the people in power right now, um, they don't quit. So they don't let like one failure stop them. They'll try again until they get their policy in. And a lot of times, us people that are as you said, open hearted and want actually good and by very idealistically world peace. um,
Yes.
we tend to with one punch already be like, oh, this is exhausting. And then with the second punch, we're like, maybe never mind. This is like, we're not going to win. And I think that is a mindset that has to change amongst us, that community that sees a better way of doing things that is more in relation with one of other, as you were saying, and more harmonious with people and with the planet. And we have to continue with the same um, conviction that these people with that are kind of like looking out for themselves. We have to look out for each other and continue doing so. And I also don't know what's gonna happen, but I hope that by doing so we can actually get somewhere.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, even in hearing you say that, I'm like, so the phrase, I believe it's Audre Lorde, like the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, I believe is the quote. Um, but it's like this concept of like, if you want to like restructure this, like you can't do it the same way that they've done building it. And I think a lot of the time we go into like, we're going to do it like they do it. And then we get worn out because they have more money or a different kind of access to be doing it the way they're doing it. I think the way that we do this has to be rooted in the way that we want it to end up, which is a sustainable way, a communal way, a way that we are all bringing our individual gifts and talents in a sustainable way to really create something different.
Mhm. I agree with that. Yeah.
We could probably talk about this for
We
forever.
can talk about it forever. Maybe down the line you'll come back and we continue.
Yeah.
This
Sounds great.
right down up the Caribbean. But yeah,
Yes.
I had fun talking to you about this, about self-love, self-relationship. I think we actually talked a lot about interconnectedness of like on
Mm,
how we feel on an individual level and the traumas and how that's affecting all of the systems. Because I remember
mm,
I did climate coach training in
mm,
June, and we were doing an exercise, and they separated like states and companies and blah 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 and the individual people. And my comment was, well, it's all people. It's all human
mm,
systems, human made. The government is human made. The companies are human. It's all humans operating that. So
mm,
there's definitely an interconnectedness that if we start healing individually and communally, I think that will indeed reflect in how we do companies or businesses. I don't know if they will exist. I'm putting it with a question mark, but whatever will replace it. Yeah,
mm,
I think that starts with us individually healing, and
mm,
then radiating that healing out to our community,
mm,
and then having like communal healing, and then it will reflect in our systems because the systems we have right now is indeed heavily focused on this lack on fear. It's very fearful system.
mm, mm.
Fear of
Yeah.
lacking, fear of not being the best. Um, fear of not being good enough. There's just a lot of fear.
Mhm.
I think we need to clear that. I've been clearing fear these
Mm.
days in my energy bubble. And I really start to recognize that a lot of what we do is out of fear. And yeah, that
Yeah.
brings that. I think to some extent, even the shame falls somewhere on the fear
Yes.
spectrum. But yeah, for us not to go into a different side thing, I'm gonna cut it here. And you're welcome to come back, and we'll like do a full digestion of fear.
I would love that. Thanks for having me.
For joining again, and for those who listen to us sidetracking, but then getting on the right track again. Thank you, and until next time.